Good afternoon to you all students of Open Distance E-Learning Center. I want to welcome you to today's session, today's lecture on part 213, Organizational Conflict and Management. I am by name Mr. AUTA Elijah ANOKUN. I'm here to give you lecture of study session 3, which is conflict management. We have the learning outcome for this session. So it's expected that at the end of this session, the students of conflict management will be able to highlight the basic concept associated with conflict management. 2, be able to distinguish between conflict prevention, conflict settlement, conflict resolution, and conflict management. These are the things that you are expected to do at the end of this session. By way of introduction, this particular session will expose you to the meaning, concept, and objective of conflict management. In this session, you will also know how to distinguish between conflict prevention, conflict settlement, conflict resolution, and conflict management. This will enable you to also know the various approaches to conflict management and how to identify the various conflict management styles that are there in conflict management. First, we shall be looking at the meaning of conflict. Conflict has been defined by so many scholars, but for the sake of this study, we decided to define conflict as an opposition among social entities directed against one another. So what means that conflict is when there is a disagreement between one another, or between entities and another entities. It means conflict. Conflict refers to a competition and opposition among social entities, independently striving for something of which the resources are inadequate to satisfy all. Scarcity can also cause conflict. When there is an inadequate resources that cannot go around, it can cause conflict, especially when the total number of population is more than the total number of available resources. It can cause conflict. So conflict, when you say scarcity also can cause conflict. Then conflict also means contradictions arising from differences in interests, ideas, ideologies, orientation, belief, and perception and tendency. Yes, when your interest and somebody is not the same, it can cause conflict. When you differ in ideas, it can cause conflict. When the information you have is different from what the other person have, it will need to cause a very sharp conflict. Even belief system can also cause conflict. For example, like Christians and Muslims. Like in the case of, we have so many people who are victims, who have their situation either cause conflict or a lot of things. Like in the case of Deborah in Sokoto, when she got killed, it nearly almost caused conflict. So because by that position they felt that she insulted the God of Islam. So these are some of the things that can cause conflict. Then perceptions, when you just perceive, you have an experience about something and you don't even judge it well, it causes conflicts. So a lot of that. So conflict is also an action which can prevent or obstruct, interfere with injuries, renders. So what we are trying to say is, if there is prevention against one right, it can cause conflict. That's what we mean by that. The meaning of conflict management. Conflict management is the use of processes, tools, and skills to find creative and respectful ways to manage disagreements and dispute. Conflict management includes the ability to resolve conflict collaboratively through effective communication skills such as active listening and assertive speaking. What conflict management is? Conflict management is the ability to be able to define the best way to solve problem that exists between two or more people who have a very sharp disagreement, maybe as a result of maybe denial of rights, maybe scarcity, or anything that can like that. So conflict management is actually you developing a particular approach to actually end or probably to minimize, as the case may be, in order to resolve any differences that exist between two or more people. The next issue we shall be looking at is what are the kinds of conflict management work do we do? One, it means that before conflict management can take place, there are certain things to do. There are certain things that we need to put in place. Before conflict, you need to recognize the types and the cause of conflict that you want to resolve. So it's very, very important. You have knowledge of the kinds of conflict and what causes the conflict. These are the ways, if we adopt, that enable us to actually overcome conflict in any way. The next thing to look at is we should be able to see conflict as an opportunity for change. Many times we see conflict from negative point of view, but conflict has brought a lot of development, has brought a lot of changes. You discover that two people are not really in talk, they are not talking together, but sometimes until when conflict arises, they begin to feel the advantages and the importance each other they have on each other. So conflict also it's an agent of change. That's what we are trying to say. Very important. Then during conflicts, we should be aware of perceptions, attitudes, and biases. It's very, very important. So during conflict, we must take note that our perception cannot be the same. So whosoever that want to manage conflicts must put this into consideration. Then we should also know that attitudes and biases. We must avoid that attacking each other attitudes and trying to be biased. Is very, very wrong. So these are the things that we need to do before we engage into conflict management. Use active listening and assertive speaking and distinguish a person want from it. The truth remains that sometimes what may cause a conflict might just be a want, might not even be a need. And so if you don't understand this, it can cause conflict actually. So as someone who actually wants to manage conflict, you should be able to have a good listening ear. It's very, very important. You need to hear the whole party first so that you not jump into conclusion. It's very, very important. And your communication should be positive. Your communication should be very objective. Don't be biased. Very, very important. Then utilize collaborative problem solving. You can't solve a problem alone. Especially when you don't know the types and the cause of conflict, you may end up passing a wrong journey. So sometimes you need to seek collaborations, maybe from relations of the various parties, maybe friends, or anybody that is linked to that person. So all of these things are things that it has to be. Then after conflict, build confidence. It's very important. After you have resolved two people who are in crisis or in fight, you're able to build confidence and self-awareness to develop mutual understanding, trust, and respect. It's very, very important. These are key. You need to that self-awareness. You need to be able to. It's another thing for you to solve people problem. Not for you to let them know that, let them be aware that the steps or the action they took is actually wrong and can affect them. So all of this is very important. So then let there be an understanding. That should not be just let there be a mutual understanding. It's very, very important. Mutual understanding, it means that the party that are involved should to come to a point of agreement that I am wrong or I know I'm wrong, that my action is actually wrong. Then until that is done, then trust. Trust is very important. Once party that involved in conflict believe that they trusted the third party who is involved, is very important. Then respect. You have to respect the party that are involved in conflict. You have to respect their opinion, respect their position, despite the fact that they are wrong. They may have certain value that they have, and if you're not careful, you can cause. Then you're able to create a sustainable solution. Anybody that must want to manage or be a conflict manager, you should be able to know that whatever solution you bring up, such a solution should be a sustainable solution. Because if not, you may end in conflict now. In the next 1 hour, you can come again. So that's why you don't just resolve conflict. You should be able to create a very workable solution. It's very important. Then Repair and maintain relationships is very, very important. You know, After conflict, it's very, very important that we need to repair the relationship that has been tempered, has been destroyed. So it's very, very important. Then the difference between conflict prevention, settlement and resolution, and conflict management. Conflict prevention refers to efforts and strategies aimed at identifying and addressing the root cause and potential trigger of conflict before it escalates into violence or major dispute. Conflict prevention is all about, it's like an antibiotic, right, that you developed over time to actually overcome conflicts. It's very, very important. So it has to be an effort that must be built consciously, that must be developed. It's very, very important. It has to be developed. And in developing, you need to be able to identify the strategies and the root cause of that issue. If you don't identify the root cause of an issue, you may be having it very wrong. You know. So the next issue is conflict settlement. Conflict settlement involves finding an agreement or compromise between conflict parties to resolve a dispute or conflict. Settlement, there should be an agreement. Means for if two people are involved in crisis or misunderstanding, you don't just look at one person. The two must agree. And once there is no agreement, there will be no settlement. And in doing so, you have to let it. Sometimes you discover that even when someone is actually at fault, but you notice that that person is mature, you share the blame. That's the point of compromise. The two of them must agree that yes, we were wrong. Then conflict resolution. Conflict management or conflict resolution involve dealing with the underlying causes and processes that give rise to conflicts, in addition to resolving the immediate issue. Now, conflict resolution, you must try to understand the cause and which process should be followed. It's very, very important. Because when you don't have knowledge about something, you can't give anything. It can't be a solution. So when you are understanding the causes, then you now also going to understand the processes that needs to be followed. So sometimes we jump processes, we don't even have knowledge about the causes about something. We jump into conclusion and we say this person is wrong or that person is right. Those are the issues we must not take for granted. Then conflict management. Management of conflict encompasses all strategies for dealing with conflict at different stages. Conflict has different phases, different stages actually, but the management aspect of it is now has to do with the strategies you developed to be able to manage the conflicts. Thank you. See you in our next class.